My life really should have been fucked up. There is no logical way to have the background that I've had that would have rationally led to the outcome that is my life today. I was a foster child for years. I remember being adopted when I was 6 or 7 years old, around that age, and not really understanding what was going on, going into a very different family dynamic than the one that I was born into, even though, I didn't know a whole lot about my biological family. And I remember a few good years with that family. And then I started to see the disintegration of the relationship between my adoptive mother and father. And the next thing I know, a couple of years later, I'm in the foster care system alone. I have a biological brother that's older than me, so he was able to kind of age out of the children and family services system before I could. And so I ended up going through these foster homes without him for the most part. And that isolated me in more than one way. Not only had I been taken away from my biological family into this completely new family, placed into this completely new family, but then I'd been moved out of that family and into another new family of foster parents. And in many of those cases, there were other foster children in the home that had siblings, also usually living with us in the home. So in a lot of cases, I was the only one without another sibling in these homes. So it was a lot of isolation and feeling left out like an outsider. So I go through these foster homes throughout my teenage years. And the one that I ended up being in when I was, I think, 12, when I transitioned into, I stayed with him, that was my last foster home before my second adoption. So I was adopted twice. So I was adopted at 16 years old by this foster family that I am referring to. So that was my second adoption. Just craziness, right? That alone is enough to really mess up your your head and your sense of self and your self-esteem and just all kinds of craziness, of course, that I'm not even going to go into all the details of all the things that I experienced in all of these different environments. I probably will write a little bit about some of this in the book that I'm working on, where I'm going to incorporate more of my memoir into that book, even though that's not the primary focus of it. But, I've learned to really value my story, and I'll come back around to that in this video. There were just so many wild things that would throw a person off. I even found out that my birth date was wrong on my birth certificate. This was in my teenage years as well. I happened to get a look at my birth certificate for the first time, and I'd been celebrating my birthday on January 9th. And I saw on my birth certificate that my birthday was actually January 7th. And thank God it wasn't like a different year or a different month, but still thinking that your birthday is on a certain day and then realizing it's on a different day in your teenage years, I was horrified. I was extremely embarrassed. I was outraged to the point where I refused to acknowledge it. For years, I just held on to January 9th. And a lot of my, old friends know about this. I would just celebrate my birthday on January 9th. I went to college. My birthday's January 9th. It was on all of my documents and everything. To this day, I have to correct it. I'll still, every once in a while, something will come in and it'll have January 9th and I have to correct it because I did later on correct it officially. What? What? So that happened. And I don't know, at some point, I think in grad school or maybe right after grad school, when I was, getting married and all those sorts of things, I was like, okay, I need to make sure that all of my documents reflect January 7th and not January 9th, since my birth certificate says January 7th. So I went through that whole process of getting everything changed. I have no idea how that even happened. Even my social security card had the 9th on it and not the 7th. My birth certificate was the only document that had the 7th on it. If I hadn't seen that, I would have continued on, celebrating my birthday on the 9th, which again it's a couple day difference, but it's a difference that wasn't noticed at birth or a few years later when I was a baby, a child, a toddler. No one noticed this. And that was a part of why I was so upset because I'm like, how did I get through all of these years of life, going through all of these different systems, the Department of Children and Family Services, and all these other structures for welfare structures, and no one noticed that my birthday had been wrong or wasn't aligned with my birth certificate? And that just made me feel so disregarded. Like I really didn't matter. If I had that feeling before, I really felt it then. Like you don't even matter enough for them to make sure that your birth date is correct. And I know there's some cultures where birth dates aren't as important and some people don't know what their birth date is or what the year is. Like that is a thing. Actually, a lot of Africans that I've met, that's been the case in their family like lineage. But it's definitely not something that I was accustomed to in the US. So that's just one instance of, my experience growing up in these different homes and transitioning through these different systems where on so many different occasions I was just made to feel worthless and unimportant and a throwaway person, a throwaway kid, the foster kid. Close your eyes and just think foster child. What image comes to mind? It's probably not some like well kept, loved on kid there. And most times, unfortunately, that is on par with the experience of a lot of foster children where they are neglected, they are treated poorly, they're harmed in some cases. They bounce from home to home to home to home to home. And even in that, I think I can look back and say that I was fortunate because I did go to maybe about three or four homes. But I've known foster children that have gone to 12 homes, 20 or more homes in their time in the system. And the one thing that foster care DCFS ward status did grant me was a scholarship to college. When I went to college after high school, I got a DCFS scholarship, which still exists. They've expanded it, and now more foster children are able to get that scholarship, and that's wonderful. Because at the time when I was applying, I think someone told me about it. I knew nothing about it, but maybe a caseworker or someone told me about it. There was only like 11 or 12 students who got that scholarship, and there are thousands of children in the foster care system. Um, And I was one of those like 11 children to get that scholarship. So it was reflective of a lot of things. I'd performed well academically and all that, but still, that's pretty elite. Um, and the scholarship was a really great one. It covered all 4 years of tuition. It paid for books. And they provided a stipend. I think it was like $500 or more monthly stipend for other expenses. So a pretty nice scholarship, huh, for a college student, for an 18-year-old, which was me at the time. Unfortunately, I screwed that up my sophomore year. You'll have to see the video on the channel where I talk about flunking out of college my sophomore year. It was a temporary thing. I went home in the summer and got it together and was able to go back to college the very next semester. So I actually didn't miss any time in college. In undergrad, I still graduated in 4 years. So thank you, God, for that. But I did flunk out. And when I flunked out, I actually lost the scholarship. So when I came back, to college, I had to start taking out loans, and that whole thing was just a whole, mess that I just was able to recover from recently, with my loans being forgiven. Um, but that was just like a year ago. So, I'm 43 now, so it was a long time of being in student loan debt. So, yeah, there's nothing, as I was saying, there's nothing that would have rationally led to my life ending up the way that it is now, where I've had a career for almost 20 years, being a professor nonetheless in colleges and universities, where I've written books, textbooks, starting my own business now, and just so many different opportunities and experiences I've been able to have. And it gets better. It definitely has challenges, and I face many challenges often, so don't get it twisted. But I am very grateful for my life that I have now. I'm grateful for every bit of it. And the things that I've gone through have definitely shaped the person that I am today. So you also may be someone who had to go through the school of the hard knocks. That movie Annie, especially the one with the curly red-haired Annie, that was my favorite one. And I used to watch that so many times. I felt so connected to that movie and to Annie because I was the orphan kid. It was me. I didn't live in an orphanage, but I was in foster homes. I was treated poorly, not to the extent that Annie was in the film. And thank you again to God. Thank you again to Allah that I didn't experience any sexual violence or physical violence in any other way like that. Like, in some cases that has happened to foster children, and I didn't have to go through that. So it could have been a lot worse. But there are definitely instances where I was neglected, I wasn't treated fairly. Absolutely. So I resonated so much with that movie, Annie. Oh, I still love that movie today, and I've loved all of the renditions and variations of it. I've gone to see different variations of the play. That will always be a movie that sits in my heart because I feel like that was me and that was my people. Ah, getting a little emotional here. Woo, okay, it's the first video I've cried in. Oh my goodness. Okay. My eyeliner is already sensitive, like just a little drippage, and it's like black under the eyes instantly, so I can't have this. But it's a hard knock life for us. It's a hard knock life for us. Oh my goodness. Yes, it was a hard knock life. Yes, it was. And there was no Daddy Warbucks for me. There was no Daddy Warbucks. But what I did have, I should have brought a tissue. I did not expect all of this. Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. Forgive me because now I'm gonna be sniffling and looking a hot mess, and we're gonna continue. I'm not stopping anything and I'm not editing. There was no Daddy Warbucks. There was no one to come save me. But God was merciful, you know, because it always could have been worse. Oh, it always could have been worse. It could have been so much worse. And I always just had this sense of like, I am going to have a better life. Like, this can't be my story. This can't be my full story. I remember I would tell myself that, if not verbally out loud, I would say it to myself in my head regularly. I'm going to have a better life than this. If I have children, this isn't going to be their life. Like, I committed that to myself at a really young age. And, movies and books, I talk about this again in other videos. The education as an anchor video, I talk about this a little bit. And things I've written, I've started to talk about this a little bit more. But I used to watch a lot of movies, like older, 80s, 90s movies, and like girls just want to have fun and stuff like that. And I read a lot, and it wasn't necessarily because I was just so studious, but it was a way of seeing a different reality and just telling myself, you can also have something different. Oh my goodness. All right. Like you can have something different. Like look at all the things these characters have gone through. And at the end of the movie, usually they'd overcome those things. Things got a little bit better for them. So you can do this too. And that gave me hope. That gave me inspiration. That's what got me through some really difficult times is I just get lost in my imagination. I get lost in my dreams and just live there. I am going to stop crying. I am going to stop crying. I promise you, I'm going to stop crying. It was my escape from reality, these books and movies, but it was also my source of hope because one of the lessons that I've learned is that value has to start within. Even with the Orphan Annie story, yeah, there was a Daddy Warbucks that came along, but Annie was always rebellious. Annie wasn't settling for the way that she was being treated in that orphanage. She was pushing back the whole time. You have to really honestly and authentically believe for yourself that you are valuable. You have to make yourself believe that you can have something better than what you have now. No one can do that for you. The opportunities can present themselves. You could inherit a whole bunch of money, but if it isn't in you, you're gonna notice it. It's gonna come up. Maybe it'll show up in the way that you let yourself be treated by people, letting yourself be treated badly, talked down to, abused, taken advantage of. Maybe it shows up in you not making good decisions. Maybe it shows up in you not striving for more when you know that you deserve more, when you know that you deserve better. It shows up in a lot of different ways, the lack of self-value. So you have to foster that within yourself and hold on to it like you are holding on to the end of a cliff to prevent yourself from falling. Hold on to that so tightly and reinforce that. And eventually you'll start to have a life that reflects that. And then you'll have that social proof. Not only that internal knowing, but you'll have that social proof where you say, okay, look at these great relationships I've formed. Look at these people I've helped. Look at these children I've raised well. Look at the successful career I've had. Look at how well I can do this and that. It shows up, right? Our beliefs, our values, the way we feel about ourselves, it shows up in so many different ways. So I'm going to wrap this video up by saying that you are not what has happened to you throughout your life. You aren't what happened to you yesterday. Yesterday is gone. It's never coming back. 5 minutes ago is gone. We spend so much time wallowing in the past wallowing about the bad decision we made or the, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And it's healthy to reflect on those things and to learn from them and start doing something differently. That's the ideal path. But wallowing in it, manifesting shame and disappointment in yourself as a part of your identity, that's where it becomes real problematic. Yes, our experiences shape us, but there is no one experience that makes you who you are as a whole. So if you are someone that came from some rough and tumble beginnings, or maybe your life right now is difficult, you're going through some things right now, that's not a liability. Think of that as your power, actually. Because one day, if you decide and you start really making those sincere steps toward change and development, one day that's going to be the way that you can help somebody else. There are over 8 billion people in this world right now. And we tend to think that our isolated individual experiences are unique to us. Of course, they're not. There is definitely somebody out there, probably hundreds of people out there in the world who can relate to what you've gone through, who can connect with you, who needed to hear you say what you said, who needed to see you break down in a YouTube video because it allows them to see it in themselves and allows them to extract those feelings from themselves and heal. That's powerful. That's magical. That's life-changing. I'm sure you've all heard this before, but some of the most beautiful things in life are created through a lot of trial and error. If we're thinking about all the technology that exists, that stuff didn't come about in a week. There's a lot of launches and experiments that failed, flopped magnificently. People lost millions of dollars, but they didn't give up. Eventually, they're able to create that amazing piece of technology like a computer, like a smartphone. You know what I'm saying? These AI tools, however we feel about that, they're still figuring out this stuff. But there are some people in the world that won't give up, that are committed. And for a lot of those people, they render the most beautiful results. Diamonds are formed under pressure. So I definitely learned my first lessons from the school of the hard knocks. And life continues to to be my university, if you will. But now I see all of those experiences as ways that I can help other people and things that shape the person that I am today in front of you. And I'm happy with the person that I am today. And I'm very satisfied with my life and the way I move through the world right now. I'm very, very happy about that. And I'm grateful. I love myself. So that's it, y'all. This is Class with Prof. Eve, where we use sociological insight to make sense of modern life experiences. Thank you so much for getting through this entire video. I am definitely open to hearing your comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace. All right, peace.